Thanks, Ted. Well, welcome everybody. I'd say fellas, but Tara's here, so she might punch me out. Hopefully the fans stay quiet long enough you can hear me. So I thought I'd do a brief introduction about grinding, and then we will get to some workstations that have been set up here so you can maybe get some hands-on or eyes on what's going on. Grinding is controversial. Some of the numbers I'll mention tonight are not cast in stone. Every expert's got their own special grind and angle. The point is, usually grinding is about chapter 2 or 3 or at most 4 in any book on turning. It's really important. Like, why bother, right? Why not just use them like you bought them? They got to be good. It's paid a lot of money for them. But the as purchased grinds that you get are actually pretty useless. They just bang them on in the factory so that they said they ground it. And they're not a very useful grind. A sharp tool is a safe tool, just like using a sharp knife in the kitchen. You get less tear out, you get less sanding as a result of that, a better finish. And as a result, wood turning is way more fun with a sharp tool. You find out right away, when you got a sharp tool and you're turning, then you go back the next day and your tool's dull and you turn. It was more fun yesterday when it was sharp because you don't have to push hard. The chips just float off. So it's definitely worth learning something about. What to use to sharpen. How about this? How about a file? Yeah, I can use a file to sharpen everything. It's really cheap and it really doesn't work. So no files. So then you're into some kind of a bench grinder, and I'll get to the other things you can use a little later. Bench grinders like these are the most popular thing. Oh, I have a 6-inch bench grinder. I'll use that. 6-inch bench grinders are too small, physically. This is a 6-inch wheel. And what they do is they put a lot of hollow where the tool follows the stone, and that's too much. So generally 8-inch is what you'll see. There are some that are a little bit bigger like the Tormax, but 8-inch is what you'll see. And the other common thing you see is a high-speed grinder. In other words, it does 3,450 RPMs. That's generally too fast. You're going to burn your steel anyway, and high-speed steel can take a real beating. If it gets a little bit blue, it doesn't matter that much. But better to have a low-speed grinder, which is 1725, and they're labeled as low speed. I don't think you need a variable speed grinder. Such things exist. If you got a low speed, you don't have to think about it. It's going the right speed. So then you get into stones. You buy one of these things and it comes with a gray stone. How do the French say? These are merde. Sheet. These are not, for our purposes, these are not good. Enough said. They're just not good. So so you start learning about it, and maybe you don't have anybody to teach you. So then you get into the blue stones. Norton makes these. I think I got this one from Lee Valley. This is 80 grit. I got a 46. I balance them and all that. These are okay. There are problems. So then you learn a little bit more, and you get into the white stones. These are real nice. So the white stones are nice because they're a friable material. In other words, it breaks off easily. They're softer than the blue ones. And softer means you get a new cutting edge sooner. But they're softer, so they wear out quicker. I used one of these for a while, and I balanced my blue ones a whole bit. But really, the best, when you can afford it, are these CBN mills. Cubic boron nitride is a material that is for sharpening high-speed steel. For high-speed steel, these are better than diamond. Oh, diamond's the hardest thing. Diamond, if it gets too hot, it burns. This doesn't. These things will last you forever. They'll cost you an arm or a leg, but they last you forever. They're a little heavy, so your grinder doesn't come up to speed quite as quickly, but when you can afford it, that's the way to go. The other thing is their diameter is always the same. These ones, the diameter slowly gets smaller over the years, so your grind actually changes. Yeah, then pretty soon you're too cheap, so eventually you get down to a 6-inch, and then you wonder why you're having trouble. When you can afford it, I highly recommend you thinking about a CBN wheel. I've got an 80. Generally 80 is a number that the experts will say is a decent grit for grinding. I've also got a 220. And I use that for touching up my bowl gouges. It hardly takes any steel off, and it's just razor sharp. If you're going to be shaping your tools, and some people do a lot of that, modifying things, then you need something like an 80 to gnaw it off a little quicker. Safety. Problem with these kind of things is the dust that they make. The stuff is really not good for you. So glasses, some kind of base protection for those. And these, even though they may be aluminum oxide or something similar, it's not good for you. CBN throws off the metal particles. You know, if they're aerosolized, they're probably not so good for you either, quite honestly. So safety is a thing. And one of these, like these stones do break. Once in a long while, they'll come into pieces, and if you have no safety gear on, then you could be in big trouble. These ones are made out of aluminum or steel. The steel ones are way more expensive, and they don't come apart. Another advantage, I guess. Now, another way of grinding is with a belt grinder. So Robert Sorby makes a very nice belt grinder. I think Stu has one. And the advantage of that is they're fast, they're cooler, and there's no hollow grinding because you're sharpening against a flat surface. And you can get a variety of different belts. They're really expensive. But some people like to buy the best kind of a tool. The other one that's out there are the Tormacs. And Tormac has been around for a long time. They're an expensive grinder. They're a slow-speed grinder, and typically their stone rotates in water. So you get a very cool treatment to your metal. They have a zillion jigs for whatever it is you're sharpening, and you can get truly spectacular sharpening results out of one of those. They do leather strop wheels and all kinds of stuff. They're really luxurious tools as well. We had a discussion the other night at our meeting about hand grinding, and some people like hand grinding. Bert does a lot of hand grinding, but Bert has done a crap ton of turning in his life. And beginners, you know, you got enough trouble learning how to turn. So I would really recommend investing in one of these Wolverine systems. So the Wolverine system usually comes with a plate like that, and a movable pocket one. You can get a thing for skews that fits in the pocket. You can get a very nice grind every time. So some of these famous American teachers that are out there and they have students all the time, that's what they go to, because there's less screwing around in classes. You set up the thing, you sharpen your tool, you're done. Go back to learning how to turn. So when you can afford it, that's the way to go. Otherwise, you can keep using this kind of wheel, these kinds of wheels. You do have to keep them flat. Wolverine does have a diamond tip dressing thing that goes in there, and it makes the surface flat as you rub it across. You can get these nasty things that are for dressing wheels, or you can get a diamond one like that. I've been down this whole thing. I don't use these anymore at all. But grinding, dressing a wheel equal dust. So you have to have some kind of dust control to control the nasty stuff. So if you've got some kind of jig, and there are a bazillion jigs historically, there's a bazillion jigs out there, things that mount on the floor and all kinds of things. But this one has really come to dominate a lot of the market. And what goes along with this Wolverine system is the one-way also makes this very grind jig. So your demonstrators will be showing you a little bit how to use this. But you know, if you can put the tool in the same length every time, and typically you'll have a hole for, this one's 1 3/4 inches, that's how much I use. So you put your tool in here, stick it in there so it sticks out 1 3/4 inches. You got the same grind every time. It makes life worth living. So the other thing that comes up when you're grinding is, well, yeah, I don't want to grind all the time, or you know, I don't want to do my parting tool all the time. Well, you don't have to. With things like a parting tool, especially those prismatic, you know, prismatic ones, or diamond shaped or whatever, because they've got quite a hollow grind between the tip and the base of it, you can actually get a little diamond hole like this. Put it flat across the very tip and the heel of it, and just gently stroke it, and you see it sharpening along the edge. And you can feel when it's flat. Skew chisels, you do them that way, and parting tools typically do that way. I don't use it for bowl gouges and spindle gouges. I just go back to my 220 stone and do it that way. The other thing, a lot of times with spindle gouges, you'll raise a burr when you sharpen it on the inside. So I've got a little curved ceramic stone that I got from somewhere. I don't even know what grit it is, 1,000 grit. And you just brush that from the inside where the curve is, down, not over, just down to take the burr off, and then it'll cut a little nicer. And the other little thing is, especially for your bowl gouges using inside a bowl, you've got a bevel maybe this long, and when you're trying to make the corner, especially the corner leading to the bottom, which typically is the sharper one, you come against the bevel. It's too wide. So a simple thing is to put a little piece of, this is 3/8 plywood, in the back of your very grind pocket. It moves the tool ahead just a little bit, you grind it again, and you'll see you've got a secondary bevel on there, and you can get around that corner easily. Super simple to do. Now there are a variety of jigs out there. I didn't bring any tonight, darn it, I forgot. Raptors and things like that. And you can use them to set the angle against your stone, and then it's this far back and all that kind of stuff. I never use it. You know, once you get a decent grind on it, the easiest way to sharpen your tool once you got a decent grind is, I'm going to steal this one. You've got a bevel here. This is actually sharp. I'll take a Sharpie. I'll paint across the bevel, maybe 1/4 inch wide, top to bottom. And then I'll touch it. You know, I'll have my gouge inside the very grind at the appropriate stick out. Stick it on here. It'll just touch up against the wheel. I run the wheel backwards, just gently to see. If it takes it off on the heel, I have to move this a little bit further away. If it takes it off on the toe, I got to push it just a whisker back in. And as you just touch it lightly on there, it takes off a little bit of the Sharpie. If you can't tell anymore, it takes more off. It's cheap, and it's a very easy way of figuring out where you are in your tool and reproducing the grind you had last time. Because when it's at the right angle, you get a thin line top to bottom. Done. You're there. You lock it in. If you're doing bowl, you're going to go back, put it in the thing, sharpen it, go. Doesn't take long. You don't have to redo this every time if you're using the same tool. You can use little protractors, little machinist protractors like that. And those work okay for figuring out angles, which I'll talk about in a second. There's a little brass thing here that has different kinds of angles. Just put the tip of the tool in there to figure out where you're at. And that's helpful. I can't remember where I got that, either Amazon or Lee Valley or here or something, somewhere like that. These kind of things, I made these years ago, trying to figure out angles on tools. You know, they were not that well. And the jigs I talked about a little bit. The sets of jigs that give you, typically they're kind of an arc that fits between something like the pocket, and they've got a couple of contact points on the wheel.
There's one behind it there, Jeff.
Is there one behind it?
There's one. Oh, here's one there.
Yeah, okay, thanks. So this is 60 degrees. Typically you can sit your distance.
Other way up, Jeff.
Pardon? Other way up?
Yeah.
I never use
There.
this one. That doesn't
Oh,
work.
sorry, so the flat part has to be for your ankle.
You come and demonstrate that. I never use it.
I haven't used it on here, but if you put it like this, then your table here will have the right angle where it runs into it.
Oh, I see.
I
Yeah,
haven't
because the
used
way I've seen those used is like this. You've got 2 points of contact
And
back to
maybe
there,
that's a better way.
and then that sets up your angle. But I never use those. Yeah, so our demonstrators, like Bert here, are going to show you exactly how to do it.
He's referring to about setting the thing, this is a real expensive one, right?
I thought that's a scrap of wood.
This little V here is supposed to be V. You run this up till it touches, that's the perfect distance out for one way. You do everything else the way one way tells you on the berry grind, this distance is correct. And the plastic one does the same. And Pete also has the advantage of being able to set the platform with his tool.
Yeah, that was.
Sorry about that.
No. There's a lot of guys a lot smarter than I am about this stuff. What I did with my berry grind, the pocket part, is I just scratched the line. Where, once I had everything figured out, I scratched the line. That's where I put it in the stick out, put the jig on, and I'm ready to go.
I have it on my optic, I can't see the line, so I cut a stick.
I wouldn't
It all
stick.
depends on your age, Mike.
It's not getting
Put your
better.
glasses on or take them off.
So a wooden stick, that works, I guess.
Yeah.
So grinding, so you're not going to have to memorize a bunch of stuff. There are typical grinds for tools that you'll read in books, you'll see on YouTube, you'll learn at courses. And typically something like a skew, chisel, or a parting tool will be 25 degrees, both sides. But there's a range, somewhere between 22 and 42. I remember reading, I've got a Mike Darwell book, he's an Australian professional turner. He said if he could get it, 1 degree, he would. Be impossibly thin, but that's how thin he would like it to be. So a range between 22 and 42 degrees, typically 25. Scrapers. So I didn't bring a scraper, there's scrapers there. But scrapers, some people use the flat ones, some people have a round one, some people modify them so it's square on one side to do an end grain box and then rounded on the other part so you don't catch all the time. Typically they're 75 to 80 degrees. A recent innovation, so starting maybe, 10 years ago, you remember, Bosch? Was negative rakes. What's a negative rake? A negative rake scraper is anything that meets where two angles meet. So typically with a scraper, it'll be flat on top, and then you've got an angle on the frame. All you got to do to have a negative rake scraper is add a sort of a secondary, doesn't matter how long, a secondary one of maybe 15 degrees, something like that, just a little. And then you can hold your tool parallel to midline and do some scraping, and it's safer. And you can probably get a better scrape. Scrapers need a burr, so the demonstrators will talk a little bit about a burr, which is the little curls of steel coming up from when you've sharpened it. And they really help your cutting with scrapers. I'm not much on scrapers just because of the kind of wood I use. Bowl gouges, a lot of controversy there, but typically somewhere in the vicinity of 55, 60 degrees. I've heard lots of different numbers for that one. And it kind of depends on whether it's for inside a bowl or outside a bowl. If you only have one gouge, you can use it for both. And how the hollowed out part in the bowl gouge is made, that matters for whether it's inside or outside. And the really round ones tend to be more for inside. And the sort of U-shaped or almost V-shaped ones are more for outside. Spindle gouges, 35 degrees typically, but the range will run between 20 and 35 depending on who's doing it. So some people like a really shallow, pointy spindle gouge with a long fingernail on it. And they can be pretty aggressive if you get in trouble. So you've got to be careful about that, especially beginners. When people have been turning for a while and then they've decided, well, you know, I like my spindle gouge to be a little more aggressive for doing end grain hollowing or something, then you start changing how you're doing it a little bit when you get more experienced. A spindle roughing gouge is typically 45 degrees, and they're probably just about the easiest ones to sharpen of the gouges, other than maybe scrapers. But spindle roughing gouges, you just sharpen and done. So I think that's all I need to be saying about that stuff. Any questions? So we wanted to, rather than just talking about it, we wanted to have some stations set up with some tools. And Bob and Bert have brought in a few tools to be sharpened. I don't know if anybody else brought any tools in. But then you can get one on a few and talk about what's actually being done. You can get up close and look at CBN wheels if you've never seen them. So I think that's about all I can say. So to sum up, our sharp tool is safe and way more fun, better finish. A low-speed grinder, either the white wheels or ideally the CBN wheels, 8-inch. A Wolverine grinding system with a berry grind, both made by One Way, and you can get them here, I'm sure, and you can get them other places. And they make life worth living for everybody, unless you're doing a pile of turning and then you got your own ideas about how you like to sharpen things. So that's sort of where Bert's at. And a lot of professionals get that way. Bert's not a professional, but a lot of professionals get that way because they're doing it all the time, and time is money for them. So they just zzz, and they're back at work, and that's nice. But you know that 10,000 hour thing, right? You become an expert after 10,000 hours of practice. I'll never be an expert. Safety, important. You're using one of the stones and you need some kind of breathing and face protection. And then angles, you can read about them. Easiest way to measure them is one like this, or these things. Once you get your grind set up, if you've got a very grind and a One Way, then you can reproduce that grind and just get about turning. So that's that. Anything you want to add, Bert? Ted?
Carbide tools.
Pardon?
Carbide
tools. So carbide, a lot of people start turning with carbide tools, and they're basically scrapers. And scraping, you're never going to get the finish you get with cutting. So the easiest analogy is sharpening a pencil with a knife. We've all done it at some point. And if you take the edge of the knife and you scrape along the side of the pencil, it'll take you a month of Sundays to get that thing sharp. If you slice it, you're getting sharp right away. So once you learn how to slice with your